Welcome back, everybody, to the Deconversionists. I am your host, Alan Bondar, aka the Unraveler, and my co-host, Elliott Christopherson. What's up, buddy?
Absolutely nothing, except for this show. Absolutely. How are you doing?
I'm good. You know, I'm trying to live my life in a way that it's not my fault. And I don't know why I'm trying to live like that, other than I'm desperately looking for a segue into our topic tonight. And that's the best I could do, man, on the spot. I didn't prep for that one. Actually, I don't ever plan for them. How about you, Elliott? How are you living your life?
That might make them better, might make them worse. I don't know, but hey, at least it's completely natural and organic. So.
It's completely natural and organic. Well, everybody, welcome to the show. We're so glad you're with us tonight. We hope that you will plan to jump into the open room tonight. We are talking about why evil is never God's fault. So a couple things that I want to let you know about is when you are planning on coming into the room, if you are a theist, and this is in the comments as well, right under the link, you'll see the link pinned in the comments. If you're a theist, we want you to have priority in to talk to us. So if that's you, at the end of your name, just type the word theist. You can make it pretty in parentheses or just type it or whatever. We'll see it when you pop into the room. Don't put it in the subheading or the highlight, or what do you call that, underneath your name, because that we won't see that. So make sure you put theist there, and then we'll know that you are a theist and you will be jumped to the front of the conversation. So we want to make sure that you have that chance to get in and have a conversation with us and help us understand why evil is never God's fault. Or if it is God's fault and you're one of those types of theists, we'd like to know why he actually doesn't do anything to stop it. So that would be a great conversation, and that's what we're talking about tonight. One more thing for theists, if you are a theist tonight, when you come into the room, we're going to ask you two questions. They are on the screen. Those are the rules. You need to answer these two questions before we have any further conversation. What God do you believe in, and why? Very simple questions. But Elliott, do you want to elaborate a little bit on that why so the theists can be prepared coming into the room?
Now, Ellen and I are atheists, and we can answer both those questions. We can say we don't believe in God, and we can tell you why. So that is the bare minimum that we require from you, is to tell us if you believe in a God, and of course we want to know which God, and then we want a reason. We want your best reason, not a whole collection of weak reasons, but the reason that you're actually a believer in God, like why you believe in God, not why you think someone else should believe in God or what you think is a good argument for God. We want to know why you specifically believe in God. So don't give us like if you became, let's say you're a Christian and you became a Christian through a personal experience, then we don't want you to come on and say, hey, I'm a Christian, and the reason why is the first cause argument or the transcendental argument, or because, I think everything is designed. No, we want to know that you became a Christian because of a personal experience. So it should be very simple. Like if you've been a Christian for a number of years, or even if you're a brand new Christian, probably if you're a brand new Christian, it'll be even easier for you to answer that question. Why? Why did you become a Christian?
Yes, that'd be great. We'd appreciate you sticking to that. And as we're going through the conversation, whether it be when you're approaching these two questions and you're getting off track, or you're not actually conversing about the material we're actually dialoguing about in the moment, you're going to hear this sound. That means shut up. Because if you don't, we're going to either mute you, and if we're annoyed with you, we're going to put you out of the room. So please adhere to that so that we have a chance to actually have dialogue. Elliott and I will be very respectful. We like to hear your arguments. We like to hear what you say, and we will give you a lot of rope. So we want to give you that chance. So you'll have a lot of chance to talk and dialogue. We don't try to interrupt, but you got to actually talk about something. You got to go somewhere with your presentation and with your arguments. So if you hear that, just stop talking so we don't have to start yelling over you or hit the mute button or whatever. So that'll be that.
We want to actually have a conversation. We don't want to listen to you monologue, and we are not here to get preached at. Like I was a Christian for 35 years. Ellen was a Christian for, I imagine, even longer than that. Ellen was an actual preacher himself. Like, we have sat through countless sermons and countless preaching. If you come on here and we ask you a question and the first word out of your mouth is you, that's called preaching, and you need to stop, because that's not a conversation.
Right on. So that being said, atheists or non-theists or whatever you may call yourself, we welcome you into the room as well. So feel free to use that link. It's in the comments. And if you're watching from Facebook, unfortunately, we are unable to communicate through the comments. Not exactly sure why, but if you want to jump in the room, the link is in the info. So you can check it out there and hop on in the room. We will see you come in, and we will put you in the room in order that you arrive, except for theists. You will jump the line and take priority. But unlike last week, which was our opening show, and we were just having some fun and having a bunch of people in and just talking about the subject, we're going to take one at a time and have conversation with you so that you actually have a chance to share what you want to share, which is what we want to do, is hear what you have to say. So whether you're a theist or an atheist or anything in between, if there is anything, which I don't think there is, but that's okay. You may think there is. So pop in, have a dialogue with us, and we would love to talk with you. So before we get to our guests, we just want to talk a little bit about the show tonight. We want to discuss a little bit about why evil is never God's fault. And then we will, from there, take comments and let people in and have dialogue. So, Elliott, do you want to kick us off with some conversation about why evil is never God's fault?
Well, evil is never God's fault. Now, of course, you got to understand we are addressing Christians, generally speaking, because we were both Christians, and Christians are the people that we actually want to talk to. So if I'm going to give like the reason why a Christian doesn't blame God for anything. Now, if you're a Muslim, I don't know what your reason is. And if you're a Mormon, perhaps, or, some other God believer, like a Buddhist or a Hindu of some sort, like, I don't know what your reason is. And maybe we'd like to hear that. But, speaking as a former Christian, I think the reason that Christians can't say that God's at fault for evil is because if they do that, they're calling God evil. And if God's at fault for it, they're essentially making a moral judgment upon him. And, as a Christian, that is most likely a sin. Like, you're accusing God of something. You're God's accuser. And so you are prohibited from ever actually blaming God for anything. And that sucks, because, you need to be fair. You should be fair about it. Like, if something is the fault of something, then you need to call that out. Now, I understand that feels really bad to do that, but, we have a God who, under the Christian worldview, is literally responsible for everything. He created everything. He set the rules for how things work. And apparently, for a lot of Christians, he gave humans free will. And so Christians will use the free will as the excuse for why evil exists, without acknowledging that God is the one that gave the free will, with foreknowledge, knowing that free will was going to result in evil. Therefore, God has to be responsible for anything that follows from free will that he freely gave.
Right. So let's talk for a second about the definitions that we're discussing here. When we talk about good and evil, this is intimately connected to morality. And the way I would define morality, and I think it's pretty much inherently agreed on that this would be morality. I'd be hard-pressed to see a better definition of this, but it's essentially seeking the greatest possible benefits or greatest possible well-being and the least possible harm. And that's exactly what we're seeking to do as humanists. And everybody should be a humanist, whether you're a theist or not. You should also care about humanity. And so we're seeking to do the greatest possible well-being, the least possible harm. And so when we define good and evil, we're actually talking about those two sides of that same coin. Good is providing the greatest possible well-being, and evil are things that bring the greatest harm. And so we want to try to avoid things that bring harm, called evil, and try to produce as much good as we can, which is good, which is well-being. So when you think of it in those terms, evil isn't limited to just human acts. It can be anything that causes harm. But when you're talking about it in a moral way, where it has to do with the value of the value of a person's actions, now you're attaching a morality to you're attaching something to it. And so for me, evil isn't just what a person does, but it becomes immoral when a person does evil. And that's the way that I would bring it to the table and add some depth to it. And so what I see happening in the Bible and even in the world is lots of evil. And the question is, why is God not concerned about the greatest well-being? Why does he, as some even would like to say, he just permits it, or he allows all this harm in this world? And free will doesn't answer the question, because free will may answer the moral part of it or the immoral part of it, but it doesn't solve the problem of why natural disasters and sicknesses and diseases bring so much harm in our world. If you're going to argue from a free will perspective, then all you can say is, well, God permits people to do bad, but that doesn't get God off the hook, because he still permits all of these other horrible things that happen to people. And as you said, Elliott, you can't just back it up to, well, things just happen and God just lets it. The question is, can God stop it? Does he have the power to stop evil, whether it be immoral evil or just evil things that occur, that harmful acts that occur to people? And the answer has to be yes, unless you have a God that is just not a God. That's I got to shut up, I guess. Is that?
I had to try that out at least once. But I do have an answer to your question. It's very, very simple.
Yes, we are supposed to use that on each other, Elliott.
Okay, that'll be the only time I do it. Maybe. I can't.
That's too
funny.
Promise. But anyway, yes. So it doesn't solve the problem for God. He still is in control.
Well, I can tell you why.
Go for it.
You said every person should be a humanist. The problem is that God is not a humanist. Okay, humanism means human-centered. So we want what's best for humans. God is God-centered, and he wants what's best for himself. So that's why a Christian isn't going to call themselves a humanist either, because their worldview is going to be God-centered as well. So God is doing whatever God wants to do, not what humans want to do.
That is a great point. And this is why, as a Christian, you always are defending God no matter what. I've asked so many Christians about slavery and, asking, is it moral for people to own people? And typically I'll get the answer of no. Sometimes the Christian knows where I'm going with it, and they'll immediately say, well, yeah, sometimes. And I find that to be horrid. I don't understand why anybody would think it would be okay to own anybody. I don't know anybody that would want to be owned. I don't know anybody that would want to be controlled and dictated how you live. That's just crazy to me. So to argue that it's moral in any way, shape, or form is not really a good thing to say. That's kind of immoral in itself to argue that way. So the question becomes, is it okay ever for people to own slaves? And the answer should be no. So why does God endorse it and command ways in which you can and should own slaves, and how you discipline them and beat them as long as they don't die within 3 days? And the question is, well, God always does the right thing. And so now all of a sudden you find yourself in a moral dilemma, because God always has to be good, but somehow he's not squaring with what you think is good. And so you're not allowed to question God's morality as a Christian, which goes to show you're not really being a moral agent, are you? You're just being obedient. That's not morality.
Well, God's okay with slavery because we're all God's slaves. And if you as a human are supposed to be godly, godlike, then you should own slaves too. Right.
Yep, as you should. That would be the outworking of this God. But he does for eternity. In fact, Jesus comes and we see in the New Testament, rather than condemning slavery, we see quite the opposite. Jesus actually says you're being freed from sin to become slaves of righteousness. You're still a slave. I don't care if it's good slavery. You're still a slave. There's no such thing as good slavery. And all of the apostles call themselves slaves of Christ. I don't care whether you're going to say, oh, it's a bondservant. Look, these are the terms used in the Bible. You're trying to make justifications for it. But in fact, Jesus calls you slaves for eternity. And that is, in fact, the model in the Bible. So, yeah, the question is, why evil is never God's fault? How come he always gets off the hook? How come he can always perform evil acts And you as a human being know it's immoral, and yet you still try to defend God. Elliott, what do you say we take our first guest?
Let's do it. I see he's been waiting about 5 minutes. So
I know. We left him in the sweat room for a while. I was hoping that he kind of sweated it out.
Did we violate our own rule? Did we preach at him without him being able to have a conversation?
I don't know, but everybody, welcome to the stage, Samuel Spoonhour. Super excited.
Hey guys. Can you hear me all right?
Yes, we can. Loud and clear.
Okay, awesome. Well, guys, it's great to see you both again.
You too, man.
How are you both doing?
I'm doing well.
Good enough to be here.
Awesome. Yes, I can tell. Well, I appreciate you asking. I'm doing quite well, actually. I am very tired, though. So if I say something way out there, then that's possibly why. So I probably need a nap, but that's...
Then we've got you right where we want you.
Yeah, I thought you were going to say that. But
even though we don't know the answer, we know the answers to these questions, well, at least the first one. I don't know that our audience does. So if you could answer those, that'd be great.
Those two, what God do you believe in and why? You want me to answer those?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
You are a theist, right?
Yes, I do consider myself a theist and a Protestant, Reformed, Evangelical Christian. I love telling people that, but basically gets the idea across. And so I hold to what you would consider the Judeo-Christian worldview, and that ultimately there is one God, three persons, unique in such, and ultimately ever always loving, always good, maximally loving, maximally good, maximally righteous, just, and but I will I guess not preface that, but I will I guess just maybe my understanding of evil is that evil is a lack in a good thing, and so because of that, God doesn't actually have any evil in his character, in his nature. He is only good, and so that ultimately is a God that you'd ask. It begs the question, right? Well, where's the evidence for that God? But I think that's one of the things we're here to talk about ultimately. So, but that's the God that I see in the Bible.
Okay. Right before we address that, if you don't mind for the audience, because we that is our two rules for a guest coming on. Even though we've talked before, could you give us why you're a Christian? Like, preferably like why you became a Christian, not why someone else should be one.
Yeah, that's there's certainly a lot to it, but I would say probably two big things. I saw Christianity kind of early in my life. I saw it very real in people around me, and people who said that they were, but you could tell they genuinely were not. But people who said that they were and genuinely were. So I saw this contrast, and so it got me curious enough to really seek to understand. And so I'm a Christian mostly because of the evidence that I've seen in archaeology, in biology, in physics, the different levels of physics, astrophysics, quantum physics, cosmology, and then also history. So, and I guess in history, you have also, I guess actually in science, you have the other sciences like, I forget the study of manuscripts, but so I guess I would say that, but also with the emotional that God has made himself real in my own life in a very, not, I can't necessarily say emotionally because it's more than that. It's more than just emotional. So I would say it's kind of a mix of things, but basically that's why I'm a Christian.
Okay. So to take your first line of, I guess you'd call it evidence, you were able to see a contrast between people who were not true Christians and people who were true Christians. And like this attracted you to the truth of Christianity because you could see what it looked like when it was genuine. Is that something that you could also say about other religions? Like, for example, could you have a group of Muslims who say they're Muslims, but really aren't Muslims, but also a group of Muslims who are true Muslims, and you can tell the difference between the two. Would that be fair?
Well, I would say that what I have seen in my life in people of different religions is that there are certainly those who are genuine and not genuine, but I still see a difference between a genuine Christian and a genuine person of another religion. There's still these pieces of the person that's almost like missing, except for in a genuine Christian. I often have seen just psychological differences in those people. Not that it's all the time, but in very specific instances where normally human beings would not act in that specific way or wouldn't think in that specific way, but would instead be ultimately more selfish, but instead they're not, even though it would be not only assumed, but very logical. And it's not that other people of other religions don't have those instances. It's just that their reasoning is completely different. And at least from my perception, their heart is different. Now, I'm not someone who can actually read someone's mind, so it's just all from my perception.
Could you give us an example of what one of those instances would be that proves that someone is a real Christian operating in a way that would be different than the rest of the world?
It's hard because I think it's you really only see it, at least me. I only see it when it's multiple things that happen consistently. Like, for instance, I have some Christian coworkers that I really respect. This one guy, I believe he's from Nicaragua. He only speaks Spanish, pretty much. But he is one of the nicest people I've ever met. And I've met actually quite a few from Nicaragua. And oftentimes they're actually usually Christian. But I have some friends at the same time who profess, oh yes, I'm a Christian, but have constant issues with the supervisor, constant issues with marriage life, and you can kind of tell it's partly his fault.
Right.
I
apologize. We're going to have to keep interrupting you.
Of course.
To try to move things along a little bit. But like right now, you're giving examples of someone who might be not living out the fruit of the Spirit or not proving himself to be a true Christian. But when you find a true Christian that is living that out, like, could you give us a specific example of like how they demonstrate that they're living under a different psychology, as you said?
Yeah, I was going to contrast this with this other guy, and I think, it's hard because you might find someone who's the exception to the rule, right? So, it's hard to just say one person, but I will at least give this example of this guy who just, he will run to help you. You don't even need to ask him. He will stay late for you. He always comes in early. He will always ask if he can help. He constantly works with a smile. He will laugh and joke with his coworkers. He very rarely gets upset, and he often actually helps to temper down people who are being a little selfish.
So it's an attitude difference. It's the way he conducts himself in the world.
Yeah, I would say that. And it's hard because you can do that with just basically your worldview. That doesn't necessarily require you to be changed
you don't even need a
spiritually.
Like you could do that as an atheist. You could have that.
Oh yes.
Like what's special about the Christian though?
Yeah, well, it's a mixture of how he carries himself, and then, boy, this is it's something that I don't always like to say, but it's almost like a mixture of the reasons he has for the things that he does, plus the things that he does, plus the almost like vibe, which isn't really the best word. It's more like every single second, like when you just watch him, like the things that he does, it's like it's something you have to experience. It's something, honestly, I think you have to really experience, like see him and how he acts in every little thing that he does. So I think you can do a study case on it,
Samuel,
but it would require more than one person. Sorry.
Dog went off. Sorry. When that dog goes off, it's our turn. So
Okay.
I'm going to just shift this because I'm trying to understand how this in any way relates to what we're trying to get to and understand about God and evil being his fault. Like, do these Christians require God in order for them to act good?
I think in a sense that now I believe that God exists, so I ultimately assume that if we do anything good, it's an indirect reference to a maximally good God.
Okay, so would you then argue that the reason Christians also do evil has to do with a maximally evil God?
No, because that would be them freely choosing to not do what God ultimately created them to be, which is to be good and to follow their creator and to glorify their creator. So it would be lacking humanity.
Where does evil come from, Samuel?
Well, if I say our hearts, does that count? Yeah. Well,
how did it get in our hearts? Like, where does it come from?
Well, it's more like, in my view, evil is more like a capability, if not a lack of something. It's a lack of goodness. Goodness is actually a thing. Just like heat is the vibration of particles.
Evil's not
Sorry?
a thing. Evil's not.
Yeah, in my view, evil itself is not a thing.
Then I can't do evil if it's not a thing.
Well, you can not do good.
But I can't do evil?
Well, that would just be not doing good. That would be do something that isn't good.
Taking an evil action isn't a real thing?
Well, no, I think that you can do something evil in terms of the etymology of that sentence, but I think in terms of the the essence of evil, there is no essence of evil other than just that it's a lack of goodness.
Is murdering someone an evil act?
Murder, yes, not always killing, but yes, murder.
So murdering is an evil action, so it is a thing that I do.
Yes, but we're using our understanding of the word evil to what I would say is literally just doing something that isn't good, right? We would say the same thing. We could say that, well, that isn't good, right? And so that's all I'm saying that evil really comes down to, basically, is...
You define sitting on the couch and watching TV as just something that's good?
Well, it could be good, it could be evil, depends on the intents of your heart. Because there's nuances and complexities to every little thing that you do, of course, to whether or not it's actually, in my this worldview, Judeo-Christian worldview, is it glorifying to God, right?
Right. All right. So, but is God omnipotent, for one?
All powerful? I yes, in terms that he can do anything that is logically possible because he is logic. Logic comes from him. And so ultimately he's going to do everything in, at least from what I understand, in this universe that is logically possible.
He's going to do everything that is logically possible.
Yes.
Including not being good.
Yeah.
Logically possible.
Well, if he's only good, then he can't do anything evil.
Then he can't do anything that's logically possible.
Well, no, it wouldn't be logically possible that a maximally good being could do anything evil. It's logically impossible that he could lie. That's ultimately why Scripture says that he cannot lie, because it says he's only good.
We have counterexamples from Scripture where
sure,
he says he will send a great deception that they will believe a lie.
Well, what's the context? Because that matters. And then also you have to understand that's... Sorry?
Is he responsible for the deception?
Well, again, context matters. Context is key. And ultimately you have to understand that Scripture is written, pretty much most of it's written from a human perspective of seeing ultimately what God does. And so a lot of times we have you have constantly the etymology of words that is kind of put over this idea of what God is doing. And so you have to understand, how would this culture understand what is God doing.
So
There's layers.
That's very
giving
interesting.
a command to commit an evil act, is that considered evil?
Well, if God ultimately says to do something that maybe a culture would say is wrong, if God is ultimately good, if he's maximally good, then, and of course that's the premise, then that means that whatever he commands people to do would ultimately be good. So he would never actually command. Sorry.
Yeah, and yet he does command evil acts.
Okay, well, you have to understand the context. Like, maybe give me an example.
Well, like slavery, like I just talked about. He actually,
Where does he command to actually, like,
Exodus 21, he literally
Sure.
told how to get slaves and that they should get them from their neighbors and that they can pass them on to their posterity.
yeah,
Life.
what's the context though? What's the cultural context? What is the context of that being said?
The context is that they are destroying nations, for one, because they're obliterating them and committing genocides. So God, for one, is already commanding them to go and commit genocides, which is also killing the babies of women, by the way. So that goes against your abortion, policy. And then after they're capturing these nations, God is telling them how they can take slaves, and then they're to go into these nations and take these slaves and own them.
Yeah. Yes, but you have to understand that the culture of slavery is completely different in that culture than what we had specifically in
There's ever a time anywhere under any economy that slavery is okay.
Well, what's the definition of slavery?
Samuel, how do you know that the culture of slavery was different back then if you weren't part of that culture?
Oh, well, because we have writings of Egyptian. We have Egyptian writings. We also have Mesopotamian, Palestinian, including, of course, the Bible.
You have Egyptian writings that describe slavery as not being similar to.
Well, it's not racial specific for one thing, and it wasn't. It didn't have the idea of
the Egyptian. So you're talking about Egyptian writings, and the Egyptians owned the Hebrews as slaves, and that was clearly racial, and they also kept them as literal slaves. So you're telling me that was different than what our conception of slavery was?
Well, yes, I would say that the Egyptian slavery is, but I would say that that a lot of, or at least I wouldn't even necessarily say that because bond servants isn't slavery. That's different. That's someone who owns a debt. But slavery, like for instance, in the Egyptians, where ultimately they inhumanely put taskmasters over them and force them into servitude against their will, then yes, that is, but it's because they ultimately did it for power and lust of power. So there's that evil intent behind it. Decided. Sorry.
It sounds like you're trying very, very hard to make an excuse for slavery in ancient times, just so that you can get a pass here to not blame God for allowing something. Like, what is so hard with just admitting that the Hebrews kept slaves?
I would agree that they did have slave. I'm not saying that they didn't have slaves, but I'm saying you have to understand why, because we look at things from a completely different lens. Even, for instance, you guys both look at the world in a different lens than I do. And I have a Judeo-Christian worldview.
It doesn't matter what lens.
Oh, yeah, of course it does, because that changes your perception of the world.
Your perception is not the reality of this.
Exactly, yes, which is why we should unravel things, right? We should set all the things on the table and understand it.
All right. I need to mute you for a second because you're not giving me my talking. Listen, does it matter what context you're in? Would you be willing to be owned by someone, passed on to their children, to be owned by them forever, to do what they tell you when they tell you, for no reason other than the fact that you belong to them? Would you be okay with that in any context?
Well, if the context was that my wife could go free, or that I could glorify God, because I believe the purpose of life is...
Your wife couldn't go free under the slavery that the Israelites were practicing. In fact, it gives a prescription right there in Scripture of how you can keep someone as a slave by giving them a wife, and they have children with this wife, and then the children and the wife that cannot go free with them. Therefore, this slave chooses to stay with them. So your wife isn't going free. It explicitly states that.
Yes, I can read it to you right this second.
Sure. Oh, I know exactly what you're referring to. Yes, but again, you have to understand the culture before you make a judgment. Right? The context is important.
The culture doesn't matter. My question is that okay in any culture?
Well, again, you have to understand the context.
I don't have to understand. So I have to understand if you think it is morally okay to own a slave in any context.
You only have to understand the rules, not the culture. If the rules are you are owned and you cannot go free, and you must work for these people forever until you die. That's what matters, is the rules, not the culture.
Yes, but that's a very literalistic look on history, and
you don't take it even literally?
I don't take it dead literally. No, it's often filled with metaphors and hyperboles, and that's on purpose.
Exodus 21 is not filled with metaphors and hyperbole. That is
no, but there's context.
The context is you can own slaves. That's the only thing we need to know about the context, and that God commanded it.
Right, but that's your interpretation, but I'm disagreeing with that interpretation.
So you're telling me that they did not own slaves?
No, I think they did, for certain.
You're telling me that God did not tell them to own these slaves?
I think that God said that they could, and that there was even reason for that, because he does...
Text, dude, because God actually commanded it, not just permitted it.
Yeah, but why does he say that?
Does it matter? The point is,
yes.
Well,
if, for instance, if I just went out today and I killed a man, okay? If I give zero context and I say why I didn't do that, right? You guys think that I'm crazy and immoral. But then if I say, well, actually, I'm an FBI agent, and this man who ultimately was plotting against, some politician, I shot him today, keeping him from shooting that politician.
Okay.
It's not the same thing as...
This is the context. The context is the Hebrews need people to work for them, so they have slaves. What other reason would they need slaves to work for them?
Well, ultimately, God does say, I believe it's in, maybe it is in Joshua, because he wants them to stay away from their gods because he knows they're not going to kick them all out. Even though he commands them to kick them all out. He doesn't actually say kill all of them. He says kick them out. Is the very first thing that he says. Get them out of that land because it's judgment.
These slaves didn't bring their gods with them into slavery? Really?
No, they did, but ultimately it was because they didn't fulfill God's original command, which was to kick them out of their land, and then certain people were to receive specific judgment, such as being killed and kicked out of their land, and also just being eradicated as much as possible because God was using the Israelites for judgment. It wasn't genocide on every single one. In fact, he specifies, he says, do not just kill these people, instead try to find peace with them. So,
does he explain this context in the Mosaic Law when he talks about slavery?
In Deuteronomy and in Numbers.
In the same
and then also
that he gives the rules for owning slaves, does he explain why?
I don't know if it's actually in that specific passage. I guess I would have to look it up.
Why not just bring these people into Israel and then let them go free? You've taken them out of their lands. Now they're a part of your society.
Well, because of their sins and the judgment that ultimately is to be brought on them. And so God is allowing these things that are unideal ultimately as judgment for these people.
I have an analogy for you then.
Sure.
Perhaps when we went over to Africa and we took slaves and brought them to America, we were taking them out of their cultural context, away from their own false gods, and they were here to live and work in our society for their own betterment.
Yeah, I wouldn't say that's right because we aren't God, and so we're not able to make high moral decisions
there it
like
is,
that.
Right there. If God does it, it must be okay.
Well, no, it's all well.
Except if God said it, it must be okay.
Can I at least clarify? Can I at least clarify that? Because again, my view is that God is maximally good, So anything that God does ultimately is good. Now, again,
no matter what, God's good.
right, but I think this, yeah, and so I think it
Even if
fits.
it goes against your own moral conscience.
Well, if it goes against my conscience, then maybe I'm misunderstanding.
Of course.
Maybe I'm misinterpreting. So it's good to be skeptical.
I must be wrong because God's always good.
Well,
Even
well,
though you know it's wrong.
you wouldn't do the same thing the Israelites did. You would never do that. You would never go down to Mexico and like enslave a bunch of Mexicans and to get them away from their false gods and bring them to work in our society and then not let them go.
Well, if God says specifically to, like, say, a group of Christians, for instance, and he says that these people in, for instance, Mexico have been sacrificing their children to the god Molech, and I'm going to bring judgment on them, and so you are to eradicate them and kick them out of their land and also take the rest as slaves. Then ultimately, it would be, from my culture, it would be difficult. From their culture, it's not difficult at all. They completely understood exactly what God was saying.
Well, the ancestors of the Mexicans were the Aztecs, a lot of them, and they did
Right.
sacrifice their children to these gods.
Right, yes.
I don't
But
see
now
why
they don't do that.
enslave them.
Well, actually, I think that when Spain came in, that was possibly God's judgment. We don't have special scripture to say that that's actually what God ultimately wanted.
Genocide
It's
is
just an
not
assumption.
in the world. Wow.
Let me transition for just a second because, in my opinion, I think this slavery thing, I don't understand how you can defend it, honestly, no matter what. But let me ask you a different question. Let me take it a different route. Do you know what stoning is?
Absolutely, yeah.
Can you describe it for us?
Well, it'd ultimately be, I mean, it usually was a public judgment on a person. Is you bring them out in front of pretty much your entire village to show as almost to like bring like fear on the people around. Like what this person did is evil, and so they would all take up stones and they would throw them until this person died. It was a very terrible way to die.
Can you describe a little bit more detail how that takes place? What does it look like and feel like for the person being stoned?
Oh, it's probably horrific. Not as horrific as crucifixion, I will be honest. There are worse ways to die than stoning.
I don't know. Because you're being beaten and beaten and beaten and beaten and begging for that stone to hit you in the head so it'll finally kill you because you're so beaten. Your bones are breaking.
Right.
It is probably amongst the most vicious ways to kill people. Do you think stoning is a just way to punish someone for anything?
I think that, like, for us to do that, you're saying? For us as humans?
And don't jump the guy like God said it must be good. I'm asking you.
I'm not saying that
personally that it is morally okay to stone somebody for any reason.
I mean, yes, just like I would think the electric chair would be okay in some instances, but
I mean, a case can be made that
the electric chair is quick.
It's quick. You're
Yes.
telling me that you think it's okay to stone someone to death.
I think that, in my opinion, ultimately it would have to be more of a decision from God, and let me clarify, is because it would be a higher level of judgment, and ultimately I think that a government could make that, but I would prefer, in my preference, that ultimately God would say that more directly.
Do you think the stoning... Hang on, Elliot. Let me take this line of reasoning for just a second. Do you think the stoning should, at least, if you think it's okay to stone someone, it should at least be for something that merits a stoning?
Yes, but depends on what you mean by merit.
Okay, so do you think a child going back to his mom
Alan, I'll read it.
Stoning?
I'll read it directly. Alan.
Go ahead.
Deuteronomy 21. If a man have a stubborn and rebellious son, which will not obey the voice of his father or the voice of his mother, and that, when they have chastened him, he will not hearken unto them, then shall his father and his mother lay hold on him, and bring him out unto the elders of his city, and unto the gate of his place. And they shall say unto the elders of his city, This is our stubborn and rebellious son. He will not obey our voice. He is a glutton and a drunkard. And all the men of the city shall stone him with stones, that he die.
Yes.
Is that just?
Let me throw another one in there. A woman that has been shown to have been promiscuous before she got married and had sex. Do you think that merits stoning, bro? Like, that's why I wanted you to picture it and describe it, bro. The kind of impact stones have. You think adultery and child disobedience merits stoning?
I mean, I don't see why it would be a
okay.
Well, I don't see why it would be a problem, especially in their culture. Ultimately, the point is that they're receiving judgment.
Culture, bro. Is it okay ever? Look, slavery was bad once. It was always bad. And yet they did it. And now we say, no, it's bad. Why? Because we've evolved, because we know that it's not morally good. Just like stoning. Why in any world would you think by going back in time to that culture, you would suddenly be okay with it?
Well, that's different, right? Because in this culture, we have a more Judeo-Christian worldview ingrained in us. So we look at that and say, that's not ideal.
This is the Judeo worldview. You say Judeo-Christian?
Well, that's not the Judeo-Christian worldview. That's the Jew, like, it's a very let me,
you said Judeo-Christian. This is the Judeo part of Judeo-Christian. If you want to change that and say Christian and without the Judeo part?
No, the point is the Levitical laws are a little different because they're wrapped in that specific culture from when they just came out of Egypt.
Okay. Our culture here in America included keeping slaves. Is that okay for us because of our cultural context?
Well, you have to understand why, and you have to understand who was ultimately being enslaved. You have to understand
why does it matter?
All the nuances.
Why
it's
does
part
it
of our
matter?
culture.
It's not for it. Let me say it like this: it's never okay for a human to say that I can take a slave, or even ultimately say that anything is morally good, because a human cannot decide that. Ultimately, that's something that is ingrained in God's character.
Well, you're deciding morality right now using your own brain, because you at some point had to read the Bible and determine yourself that it was a correct moral standard.
Well, more like, if it's true, then I would assume that it's moral.
You judged it to be true, and you judged it to be moral.
Sure.
Using your own ability to reason.
Yes.
You are the ultimate arbiter of what is moral or immoral.
Well, no, not what is objectively, but of my own perception, yes.
What is object? What do
you can't judge it objectively, because you're always judging it here subjectively. You subjectively judged that this was objective.
Right, but I can assume what is objective. I can come to a conclusion, right? I can look for evidence and interpret
using
that.
Your subjectivity.
Yes, I agree. But I can still find things that are objective in the world.
You realize that deferring to God doesn't make it any more objective, right? Because it's then just God's subjective law.
Well, if God is because if God is maximally good, then all things that are good, in other words, what is objective, literally comes from Him.
Yes, but
what is objectively good?
Now you brought it back to yourself, and you're asking, you're promoting the problematic question is, how do you know that God is objectively and morally good and maximally good? Because you have decided that you think that.
I mean, in a sense, yes, but I believe I have evidence for that.
You don't even have evidence for God, much less that He's morally good.
I think there's lots of evidence for God.
Well, let's not get into that right now.
Sure. We'll go down a rabbit hole.
No, this is not the rabbit hole. Well, this is the rabbit hole that we're
right.
in.
Yes.
I don't want to
right.
turn to like other arguments for or against the existence of God. I just want to talk about this subjectivity. You at some point had to judge all of this, including God. You judged God to be maximally good. You judged the Bible to be true. You've done all this using your own subjectivity. Like you are trapped inside of your brain. There is no other way for you to judge anything except through your own reasoning. Therefore,
yes,
this is a subjective statement.
Well, no, I don't think that premise means that it is subjective reasoning. I think that I can reason to objective ideas. It means it's difficult to know for sure if they are objective, but that's about it. It doesn't mean that I can't know. It just means it's difficult.
But the standard that you're using is a subjective standard.
Oops, sorry, I just wanted to turn up my. Sorry, say that again.
The standard that you're using to judge God and to judge morality or what's moral or immoral, or this, and the standard you're using to judge the Bible is a subjective standard.
Right, but with the goal of understanding the world around me.
Well, that's everyone's goal. We don't have any way out of that.
Sure, yes, but that doesn't mean that there aren't objective ideas out there. Like, I understand what you're saying, and I do agree to an extent, but I would say that there's still objective truth, objective morality, and I say that comes from God.
So when you are making a decision, like if God comes to you and he says, Samuel, I want you to go take your baby and throw its head against the wall, would you do it?
Well, I think that's illogical. I don't think God would say that because he's
the Bible.
Well, let me actually clarify that. I guess in a sense there would be instances where he would say that, but exactly. I wouldn't say that it's likely. If there's a reason ultimately for that child receiving judgment, I don't know. Like, I could understand. You know, I wouldn't see God ultimately asking me to do that too.
Samuel, if God asked you, would you do it? It's a simple question.
Well, again, I assume that God is maximally good, so I
do it. Would you do it?
I mean, personally, I would ask why.
And if he said so, because I'm the objective standard.
Well, and I would question whether or not he is God, ultimately asking that. But yes, if God truly said that, in a sense, I would, yes.
So what you're saying is you are subjectively choosing to tell God whether he's objectively moral or not.
I'm deciding that in my own mind because I'm perceiving that he is true.
Because you know too well that that's wrong.
No, not necessarily, because I could be wrong. I have to be skeptical.
It's not okay to bash babies' heads against the wall?
Well, I have to be skeptical. I have to be willing to, like, why is it that case, right? And then understand all the nuances and complexities of such. So you can't just be dead literal in your worldview because ultimately that's logical suicide. That's asinine. You have to actually, like, really lay everything down on the table, right? You got to be the unraveler, if you know what I mean.
All right, so you get married and you find out your wife's not a virgin. You cool with stoning her?
Well, in this culture...
No, any culture.
Well, that culture...
Simple question. Would you stone your wife?
No, especially because I don't follow the Levitical laws. I'm free from the law.
Is it okay for a Muslim to stone their non-virgin wife because their culture prescribes it?
I don't think that their laws are from God.
But they think they are.
Sure, but I think they're objectively wrong. So
no, you think they're subjectively wrong.
Well, subjectively, I think they're objectively wrong.
Okay, there's no such thing as that.
Well, I think there is. I mean, for instance, Rene Descartes ultimately started with basically, I think, therefore I am. And so he just got to the basics of it.
That's where we're starting with well. And you can't get much further than that.
Well, I think you can.
That's where it begins and ends because you're always going to have to judge it through your own ability to reason.
So listen, I don't know how much we're getting further with this call. We got other people on the line.
Of course.
That are waiting to come in. But it baffles me that every time we ask you a simple question, if you would do something, you have to say, well, yeah, but if I was in some culture, I'd stone my wife.
Well, no, that's not what I was saying.
But that's what you said. In that culture, you'd be okay with it.
Well, in a sense, if I grew up as a Muslim, yes, I would be okay with it. I'm
not asking you if you think you were mind-fucked to be okay with something. I'm asking you if, according to your moral code, would you be okay with it? It's a simple question, but you see how hard...
but my current moral code is what you're asking.
See how far you have to dance to defend your God.
Well, I'm just trying to understand the context. And
Samuel, I am Lord thy God, I change not.
Yes.
Is that cultural? Does he change with the culture? Does he change with the times? Does he give rules and then take them back 1,000 years?
No, but cultures do change. But God is objectively the same.
God's rules
always
change based on cultural changes?
No, it's more like he gives rules to specific well, I guess in two instances he gives rules to specific cultures.
So
actually,
God's morality is situational.
No, God's morality isn't. It's more like the rules oftentimes are more descriptive of the culture than they are prescriptive. So that's why you shouldn't just take them as dead literally, and you should understand the culture more. So that's one of my arguments.
So God had no problem commanding them not to eat shrimp, but he couldn't tell them not to stone their wives or to have slaves.
But if that is glorifying God, then why is it wrong?
Oh, I completely understand how important it is to not eat shrimp. Like, God must have found some super reason for that, over stoning people as slaves.
I think you know why he said that. It's they didn't
priority straight.
He wasn't going to explain them about the dung in their tails, so he just said stay away from it.
Samuel, can you give me the context of how you can make this make sense? Ezekiel 20:25. Wherefore I gave them also statutes that were not good, and judgments whereby they should not live. Now that's referring to these commandments in the Old Testament. I gave them statutes that were not good, judgments whereby they should not live.
I think that's referring to something that Jesus ultimately said, because he was asked about divorce one time. No, just give me a second.
It's before Jesus.
I know, but Jesus, I think Jesus says it a little more clearly, but because Ezekiel's very metaphorical in a lot of cases. But Jesus was asked about divorce, and so he says, well, God gave you those laws because of your hard hearts. God doesn't actually want divorce, right?
Oh,
and so,
but the verse speaks for itself then, and so does Jesus. When he's giving them rules that aren't good because of the hardness of their heart, because of their culture. It's
because there's more important things than those specific laws.
More important things than stoning people.
Yes, them loving God with all their heart, soul, mind, and strength. And that if they have a desire to get rid of evil, there won't be any stoning. That's why the greatest commandment is to love the Lord your God with all your heart.
But until then, until Jesus, he's gonna give them immoral commands.
I wouldn't consider them immoral. No, I think it's
were not good statutes that were not good.
Not good in a sense that it's not ideal, right? But the goal is ultimately it's not that, because for instance, the goal in life is not to live for yourself or to live at all. It's to glorify God. So if dying glorifies God, then that's a good thing. Now, that's the worldview. That's the idea.
Proving why you're not a humanist, because you're not human-centered.
Exactly, yes. I disagree with humanism and the philosophy of it and Nietzsche, because I think he's wrong. Now, of course, he, famously hated God, but he also even knew himself Christianity was good for society because it brought about a lot of good humanistic ideology. I'm not saying all of humanism's bad, but I do disagree with the fundamentals of it.
I think I have a more proper theological interpretation of the Bible than you do.
Sure. That's why you guys are atheists.
It did not change. It did not change when I became an atheist. This was my interpretation when I was a Christian.
Yes. Yeah. But
millions of other Christians agree with me. I came from a mainstream Baptist theology.
Yes. And I disagree with that. Oftentimes I think it's logical suicide.
Yeah,
so I think it's wrong.
You're making up your own interpretations.
Well, of course, in a sense, yes, I am to a degree, but I think it's objectively true. Okay. And there are also millions and millions of people who would agree with me.
You are subjectively making up your own interpretations to fit your worldview because you do not like some of these things. I want them to be literal.
No, it's more like I truly believe, in my opinion, that I've come to understand Scripture further.
I'm glad you called it an opinion.
Oh yeah, because it's always my opinion.
There you go.
We gotta move on to the next guest. But it seems like I don't believe that you would stone your wife in any culture. All right, I just don't believe that. I don't think you would think it's okay ever. I think if God came to you and said to stone your wife, I think you would say fuck you. But because that's not the situation you're placed under, it's just a theory. It's an idea in your head only, and so in your mind you can still defend God. But I promise you were placed under that scenario, you'd be the first to become an atheist. But I just can't imagine that you would actually be okay with that, dude. But anyway,
sure.
I hope you have some food for thought. Go think about these things.
Yeah, thank you guys. I appreciate it. I love the challenge. You guys are just so fun to talk to, and it's just great.
We appreciate you coming on. You can think up some new stuff for next week and drop by again.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, Samuel, you're welcome anytime. You are a great guest and thoroughly enjoyable to talk to.
Awesome.
And yeah, please keep coming back, and we'll talk to you soon, my friend.
Okay. Thank you so much, and I hope to see you soon.
Yep.
All right. Have a great day.
Bye-bye. All right, we got our next guest coming in, but before we do, any closing thoughts on that, Elliott?
I think we pretty much covered it. I mean,
right.
it's one of those situations where, Samuel speaks for himself. I wouldn't say he exposes himself to the problems, but I mean, anybody watching can judge for themselves. I don't think we have to burn more time beating up on him after.
No, Elliott, you're right. And Samuel, again, we appreciate you coming. It was fun to have you. We got two other guests in the room. Josh, we're going to be to you in just a moment. Christian, we're going to pop you in the room. I don't know. Is Christian like your name, or is Christian?
Yeah, it's my name. I was thinking about putting a subtitle in there like Samuel had to. Yeah, but yeah, it's my name.
Gotcha. Now, are you a Christian or an atheist?
Yeah, I'm a Catholic. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I converted about a couple years ago. I saw when Samuel first joined. You want me to go through the explain why I'm a Christian thing, or
do it?
Okay. Yeah. So. I mean, I'm a Catholic, and I believe in moral oughts. For one, that was a big thing in getting me. And I believe that physicalism is unjustifiable, which was a big thing for me, is, recognizing that you can't really bridge the gap in the hard problem of consciousness between epistemology and metaphysics. It's, seems to be at a stalemate there. Once we admit that everyone has a faith-based position, I think the actually more rational thing to do is believe that my mind isn't lying to me about, the things that I hold to be morally true, or, true about the world around me, and that my mind is actually a valid tool to discern reality for a reason. And I think, based on the philosophical deductions of like St. Thomas Aquinas, Plato, unmoved mover, argument from contingency, I think the best, I know this isn't a debate about the existence of God, but I think the best explanation comes in Yahweh, the God who says, I am, almost describing, ipsum esse, word for word. And then from there, it's just a matter of looking at the scriptures historically and saying, okay, I think Christ did actually fulfill the prophecies, and, there I'm a Christian. So.
How long have you been a Christian?
I was baptized as an infant, but I never made any of my sacraments growing up. So, I went to church every once in a while. I guess I was kind of an agnostic atheist until, I want to say, August 2 years ago.
Okay. And what did you exactly encounter that started you down this path?
It's kind of hard to explain, but I think I was kind of indoctrinated by the school system, as a lot of people my age were. And I was only exposed to very silly juvenile arguments of who God is. He's an old man in the sky somewhere next to Jupiter that throws lightning bolts at people when he's angry. And, that's not the classical definition of God, believe it or not. Pure being, right? Like pure actuality, the argument from contingency, going back and saying, okay, there has to be something that doesn't have potential energy, right? It's purely actual, and that would traditionally be, what we would call God. And then I think, so.
Well, I mean, I'm curious, like what the process was. Like, I mean, it didn't just come to you out of the blue. Like, did you encounter like some content creators, or did you talk to somebody? Like, what actually started you on this path?
I guess I've never been like apathetic. I've always kind of asked questions. And Alex O'Connor, Bishop Robert Barron was big for me. People like Trent Horn. But I guess I had a lot of questions, and I just didn't stop. And I had a friend that was a Lutheran, and he didn't let me rest in a lot of my bad arguments, and frankly, just emotional objections. And ultimately I was convinced. And I think it's just, I guess, from a place of, because, like scripture, right? Not to quote scripture at you, but like, it's better to be hot or cold. And I believe that's true in the sense of like, if you're lukewarm and you just don't care and you say whatever it is to kind of be friendly and then move on to the next conversation, like, you can't really work with that. But if you're very angry or very positive, that's good, because usually that means you have some actually interest in the way things ought to be.
So
were you at a point in your life where you were, searching for something, going through an existential crisis? Like what started you on this?
There wasn't like a really defining event. It was kind of a gradual thing. And personally, I don't believe I had agency in it. I think, just a lot of small things, asking for, just for like small signs. And then, you hear a song on the radio or you think of a memory. It's hard to explain, right? Like I'm not going to quote, I had a supernatural experience, but I guess I believe that I did, right? I believe that God works in mysterious ways.
So let's submit. All right. So an atheist is typically a skeptic that is unwilling to just believe something until they have evidence that validates the proposition.
Yeah.
Not evidence that's consistent with it, because evidence consistent with a proposition can demonstrate many conclusions, many options, many possibilities. But you can't land on any of them because it's just too many. It's like playing Clue. You come in and you got the candlestick and the wrench, and you got all the cards, but you haven't narrowed it down far enough. But you're trying to guess. You're so desperate to know which one that you just kind of say, "Oh, it must have been Mr. Green with the wrench in the library." Turns out you're wrong because you didn't actually work down to figure out definitely what the what the actual answer was. So my question to you is, what was the evidence that 100% verified, or at least maximally verified to you, that God was the only possible option?
Well, okay, two broader areas, right? I know that this call is kind of centered on ethics, but first I'll give, you were talking to Samuel about subjectivity and objectivity, and hopefully I can explain this right, because hopefully I fully understand it myself. But the thing is that we never interact with matter ourselves, right? We interact with our mind, right? And the physicalist has to say the mind is essentially an illusion. For my understanding, right? It's an illusion that's comprised of various, limited sense data and, the bias that's, conceived through that sense data and the subjective experience of your brain and brain states, which essentially has evolved for survival, right? So we never interact. No one has ever been able to step outside of their own mind and interact with this stuff that we call matter, right? And in the physicalist position, which I was, which I don't want to straw man anyone, but I think most atheists essentially believe that really only thing that exists is matter, right, itself. And once I realized that if you're being consistent, like everyone has a faith-based position, everyone believes, things based on faith at some point, right? And the physicalist position often boils down to a subjective choice to stop doubting in a pragmatic way, because if you were consistent, the only thing you could really verify is your own mind existing. So eventually you have to say, okay, well, I'm just going to stop here because it's convenient, or because I'm special pleading that my, observations are somehow more reliable than others, even though there's no actual rule ensuring that is the case. So there's that. And then there's also the case that, I became more sympathetic to Christianity because I realized that, is ought problem. If everything just is, there's no way to extrapolate the way things ought to be. And ultimately all morality collapses into, I like chocolate ice cream over vanilla ice cream. Right. And at that point, I was actually friendly to the Christian position because, sorry, that sidetracked me. I was friendly to the Christian position because if we're going to randomly, arbitrarily choose anything, I think Christianity is actually one of the better ones, one of the better systems. At least it's consistent. And, then I actually started to learn about it, and I was convinced through the arguments from contingency, through historical arguments. Socrates didn't write anything down famously. We only have actually medieval reproductions of secondhand accounts, medieval reproductions of firsthand accounts from like Plato and Xenophon. He didn't write anything down. Yet we believe, the average person accepts that Socrates existed, but the accounts that we have for the life of Christ are much closer to that, right, than we have from Socrates, the reproductions of the writings of Plato and Xenophon that say Socrates exists, to actually Socrates' life.
All right, so there's two main things that I'm curious about, because I take kind of exception to both of them. First thing you said was everybody takes things on faith.
Mm-hmm.
I try to pride myself as someone who takes as few things as possible on faith. When I find out that I'm taking something on faith, I immediately try to say, well, that's stupid. I don't want to do that, because I don't think faith is a good method by which we can determine anything is true. So my question to you is, how do you define faith?
Well, faith is an attitude of trust. Without talking about the theological virtues, the faith that, the average person exemplifies in their acceptance of, like, the molten core of the earth, for example, or black holes. I don't know your two line of works, so maybe you are the exception. But, like, most people, I would say, don't do the equations. They don't fly by the black holes. Yet we all, say they exist because we're confident, right? So we accept testimony, and that's what I would say faith is. Well,
it's not just testimony. We can verify. I mean, you can just Google stuff and see videos of things like evolution, for example, taking place right before your eyes. I mean, people who deny these things are just, scientific elements that you can read peer-reviewed material and show that even if you can't run the test yourself, we have every good reason to trust that these people are telling us the truth, because it's been peer-reviewed and millions of scientists aren't, in cahoots with each other trying to trick the world.
Yeah. No, and I understand. I'm doing an internal critique because I accept also that you can do those things, and I accept those things because I believe there's a reason to trust certain institutions. What I'm pointing out is the inconsistency of accepting the testimony, because most people haven't looked at the peer-reviewed studies. They haven't done the equations. They're accepting the testimony just based on, I guess, the confidence of the sheer amount of people that,
and part of it, I don't know if it's just the sheer amount of people, but part of it is that much of the things we believe are things that are explained naturally in this world. So I have no reason to say, oh, that's ridiculous, that could never happen. There's a natural explanation. So from the very get-go, there is a good solid reason why I can start out with a confidence that, okay, this may or may not be true, but it most likely is, because I have every good reason to think something natural is a good explanation. When you go to the supernatural, I'm curious, how do you find the same kind of confidence that you have in the scientific method to test the supernatural? Because we can test the natural. We can test things. Like, even if I haven't done it myself, I know it's been tested because there's a scientific model in place. That's what they do. They put models in place, and those models make predictions. And when the predictions come true and they show that these things happen, the model becomes verified. And then they put it through peer review, and the peers test it to see if they can disprove it, because that's the whole goal of science, is to disprove science, is to prove these things wrong. And when they can't, it becomes a theory. And that theory is what stands until it can be proven wrong. When it comes to God, how do you test that?
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, this is the problem of hiddenness, which boils down to the problem of evil as well. I guess the main thing I would say is that everyone requires one of two miracles. Usually it's either the Big Bang or that, we can trust our own senses. We can trust our own mind, and everything around us is actually real. My observation is reliable. I have no reason to believe so, because I don't believe that God created the universe to be, rationally understood or intelligible. Yet I just kind of accept at face value and brute fact that my mind. So usually one of those two things, right? And then when you look at the supernatural, everything does exist. We have to get back to some position where we really, truly don't understand. And there are some, large events happening in some way or another. And then you look at things like the resurrection, for example, and, it would be kind of silly if we pointed to the resurrection as an act of God if it happened all the time, right? The fact that it only happened once is the whole point.
Well, you got to pause right there. You can't say the fact that it happened. That's not a fact. There's no reason.
Yeah, my belief that it happened.
It's your belief, and I'm asking how you can justify it. I'm asking you, where is your confidence that these things, like, you have no way to test anything you just said. You're just claiming that it's your belief, and you can trust yourself. Can the Muslims trust themselves? Can those who believe in Thor trust themselves? Like, how about the people who follow Jim Jones? Can they trust themselves? I mean, which God is right? I mean, if you can't, you have to have a way by which you can test it, and that it can be tested independently as well to verify that what you're saying is true. Or else, how do you know that what you believe is actually true?
Yeah, I mean, Christianity is falsifiable. If you found the body,
tell me how I can falsify it.
If you find the body of Christ, then it's over.
That's a big if.
Yeah, I mean, if you that's just an example, right? Like, I'm bad at kind of.
No, dude, that's like saying, if I had evidence, would you believe in God?
Well, I mean, it's a falsifiable belief because it can be like, there are certain things, and I'm struggling to think of other examples, right? But like, for one example, if you found the body of Christ, obviously that proves Christianity wrong, right? Like something like physicalism is unfalsifiable because you don't actually, like I said, right? Like you just trust based on brute fact and a subjective decision to stop doubting in one way or another that everything is around you is real and your observations are reliable. Yeah, I mean, we can get into like the philosophical nature of like the argument from contingency.
Christian, you haven't given me a single falsifiable.
I can give you a way to falsify Christianity.
Yeah.
It's called Genesis chapter 1 and Genesis chapter 2. Boom, Christianity's falsified. That's inconsistent with the real world, with reality, with truth.
Why would you say that?
Falsifying though is the Bible, right? But it falsifies Christianity, of course. But that doesn't falsify God. I'm asking you how you falsify God.
Well, you falsify God. Let me think. You falsify God. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, maybe it is I accept it on faith. Yeah,
exactly. And
that is not but my whole point is though that physicalism isn't any better.
That is not.
You're taking far more things on faith than we are, though.
I disagree. I think actually, like the assumption that my mind is a tool that is meant to be used to like have knowledge, like a true justified belief, that presupposes any like logic, right? Like how do you account for logic if everything is physical, you need logic to even form thoughts in the first place.
No, you're going down a different path. Like you can't say, well, if you can't do this, then my view must be right. One wrong view doesn't make another view right. There could be a million other possibilities. So just because you can prove that our view is wrong doesn't mean you can prove that God is correct. So you still have to give a reason why God is true. And when you say you take it on faith, that is not the same thing as having confidence in testable evidence that I put forth earlier with the models that science produces. You don't have a model by which.
I see. Okay, so I think So the mechanism which created the universe, right? Those acts that we attribute to God, yeah, sure. In some ways, that's unfalsifiable. But as for why I believe specifically in Christianity and Catholicism, that is falsifiable because, right? Like if you have a God, just like without even knowing who God is, right? We can call it whatever, like the unmoved mover, like Plato and Aristotle said, like we can go back and say, okay, let's think about the attributes that this being must have in order to, can't be changing, right? Purely actual, no potential energy, is pure being in itself, right? And then you find kind of the signature of this God in the world. When he says to Moses, I am he who is, right? Like this is almost exactly, and then he says, let there be light. Like as far as we can scientifically observe, the beginning of the universe.
Is this a God you discovered or is it a God you created and then fit him into your worldview?
I discovered. I definitely discovered.
Well, then how did you figure this out? I would like to know the testable evidence that you used to determine that this God exists.
Yeah. Let me know if I stop talking because I do have a paper I wrote real quick on
Yep, you stopped.
Yeah, you stopped talking.
Boo. Oh, you're back.
Okay, yeah, sorry. I was trying to open something up so I can read it. Can you still hear me now?
Yeah. You're good.
Okay, so like ultimately we're talking about non-physical causes here, right? So for one, something that is testable is.
Hang on. Before we even go down this road, are you going to give me a bunch of arguments that prove just about any possible God?
Okay, well, you want specifically the Christian God? I thought we were talking about the existence of a being in general, because there's kind of two legs to this.
Well, I mean, okay, but even so, like any possible being, because, I'm going to guess that your arguments or your evidence that you're going to propose here is also going to include the possibility of unicorns, or the possibility of a non-sentient being that could have just brought this world into being. Like I know where you're going to go with this. I can almost guarantee I know the arguments you're going to present, and they're not going to verify any God for certain, especially not the Christian or Catholic God.
Yeah, I mean, I usually have this conversation in two legs, right? Like one is establishing the existence of God, and then the other is why I believe specifically in Christianity.
Of course,
You know, like
before you even go to the Christian God, you need to be able to establish that this God exists, and you have no way to.
yeah, so I'm kind of confused because on one hand, it seems like you're asking me to tell you why I believe in God, which is the philosophical arguments that don't apply to specifically the Christian God. And then when I mentioned why I believe in the Christian God, which is built upon the previous knowledge that I do believe a God exists, you're saying, oh, well, that doesn't actually prove that God exists. So it's, for me, right, this is like a two-leg thing. Like, I believe that God exists because of the argument from contingency, which you're right, doesn't exactly point to the Christian God. But then when I look into what actually exists in our world, as far as what's accurate to this, example, I find that the Christian God fits that bill the best.
Right. So that brings me to the second thing I with what you said earlier is you made this implication. I can't remember the exact wording you used, but landing on the best option, like this need to have an answer. And so you said, I looked around and I couldn't figure out what explained these things. And I had to have some answer. And the best answer I could come up with is the Christian God. And I believe he exists. That's not a good, reasonable way that a skeptic or an atheist ever draws conclusions. So I'm asking
let me ask you then. Let me ask you, if you don't mind. Like,
sure.
since the topic of this is supposed to be like evil, right? Like what is your basis for what is good and what is evil in the first place?
Well, okay, so my basis for what is good and what is evil is my own subjectivity. If I think something's good, it's good. If I think it's bad, it's bad. But ultimately, it's not that hard to determine it based on the definition of morality. The greatest possible.
Well, what's the definition of morality?
Bringing the greatest possible well-being and the least possible harm. So it is easy for us to decide what that looks like because
what is well-being? I'm not being snarky.
It's going to be subjective no matter what. Our definition of morality is going to be subjective. Our definition of good and evil is going to be subjective. Like, I
disagree. I heard you talking to Samuel about this earlier, but my question would be, does it?
Hold on. Do you have a way to break out of the subjectivity problem?
I do. Yeah. Because ultimately, like, does being a subjective experiencer mean that we can't experience objectivity in general?
No, we can. And here's how.
You don't know? Okay. So therefore your position is the same as mine. We're both right.
I can give an answer.
Yeah, except you've added in this mountain of theology and doctrine that you take on faith.
Well, you take everything on faith too. You just admitted. So
we do not take anything on faith.
You've got so much more. You've got.
I don't have so much more. I have a worldview. You have a worldview too. Like, what makes you just said you can't experience anything objectively with objectivity. So
that's not a worldview. Worldview is far more comprehensive than that.
I mean, like, again, we're talking about axioms of how we see existence in general here. If you say that you can't experience it in an objective manner, then it doesn't really matter what I accept and what you accept, because at that point we're both right in your eyes. It doesn't matter.
Then the conversation is pointless, right?
Exactly. So is that how you actually live life though, or is this just something you say to win debates? That's my point.
Oh, okay. So that's what we're really doing.
Well,
here.
no, I mean, I'm not trying to be snarky. It's not a personal attack. It's true, right?
It's because I recognize the system that you're using here, and that's why I asked you for how you got into this in the first place. Because this is a becoming more and more common, like, debate tactic in these conversations. So I was trying to drill down how you got here and why you're here, because I recognize this debate strategy. Are you here to win a debate, or are you here to have a conversation?
No, I mean, I'm here specifically, I think, to combat the idea that that everything is subjective, nothing means anything, but simultaneously, you should listen to my very subjective and personal opinion about why this thing is, either good or bad, and you're wrong.
Listen,
it's self-defeating.
I'm going to jump back in. Listen, where you're going with this is inconsequential to demonstrating that God exists, because whatever the problem you may have with the subjectivity of morality does not solve the problem of whether or not God exists, and if there is an objective standard. If there is only subjectivity, and if there is no meaning and purpose of life, And if some fucking pig farted us into existence, so what? You don't get to say, well, because I want there to be meaning and because I want there to be objectivity, therefore God.
Yeah, I'm not saying that though. I just assumed you didn't want to get into the big.
That's exactly.
Okay. Well, I'm just not telling you like. Okay, so we can talk about why I think God exists if you want, right? Why do you believe the universe? What do you actually believe the universe came from, right?
It doesn't matter.
Like,
you're still deflecting.
I'm not deflecting.
Our answer for your answer.
So if we accept our reality as at face value, right? This Diet Coke can only exists because a human made it, right? We can trace this this line of cause and effects back to a point eventually where there needs to be something that is an uncaused cause, right?
No. Why not? Same reason your God supposedly exists. How do you know what took place before Planck time?
I mean, we don't.
Exactly. So how can
but at least I have an explanation. You just saying, "Oh, I don't care." Like, okay.
You don't have an explanation. You made up an explanation.
I mean, I can't help you if your answer to that is just like, "Well, I don't care. I want to live life and distract myself until I die." But at the same time, I hope you realize that makes your view like kind of less attractive than mine.
First of all, I never said that, and an attractive view has nothing to do with the truth. You're still declaring things that make no difference whatsoever in what is true.
So how do you account for consciousness then as well? How do you account for consciousness?
Again, a deflection.
It's not a deflection. I mean, so I believe God explains things that physicalism cannot. So therefore, God, more rational. If you want me to provide Cartesian certainty for if that God exists, obviously I can't do that because we can't have Cartesian certainty about anything. What I can get you is into a place where, you feel confident and then you pray about it and maybe you have some, an experience one day. And then after that, it's like, okay, well, actually, I think this is real. And then you have a billion small experiences over the next year. But I can't get you.
The place you've gotten is I prefer God to any other possibility. That's just the one that I like the most. And when I pray, it makes me feel good. And when things happen, I attribute them to this God because it's my favorite option. You and I do not know what took place before Planck time. None of us do. You made up God. We don't know what it looks like. We don't know if it was a designer or not a designer or some random chance or some eternal universe of some sort. We know nothing about it. To make up an answer because that makes you uncomfortable is not the way we arrive at truth.
Well, I mean, I think you're ignoring other evidence, though, is my point, right? Like, I think you're
asking for it the whole time. What's the
evidence? I mean, again, look up. I believe in miracles, right? I believe Our Lady of Zaytun in Egypt. The Egyptian government, who was an Islamic government, actually had motive, and it's documented. They tried to disprove it, and eventually they came out and said, actually, we don't know what this is. It's likely supernatural. Our Lady of Fatima. But you'll just chalk these things up to mass hallucination because your methodology of application for what you accept and what you don't accept based on the amount of people that believe it is inconsistent. But yeah, I do believe that things like that happen.
Even if I were to grant you that miracles happen, that still does not prove a God exists. It just proves miracles exist.
So how does it?
Why a miracle happens?
If something that defies your understanding of what is physically likely possible happens, right? Like, so what would it take for you to actually believe in God? Let me ask that.
I don't know. When God finally shows me, I'll know. So far, I've never had any evidence demonstrated that can validate a God.
So a miracle would make you believe in God?
I don't know. I've never seen a miracle. You claim there's miracles. I've never seen one.
Okay. Well, I mean, if your answer to everything is, I don't know, I can't convince you. But ultimately, that doesn't mean I should accept your opinion about anything either, though.
I didn't ask you to. I'm not making the claims.
So then how is God evil? How's God,
The Christian God is evil because I'm using the Bible to verify.
You shall know him.
Yeah, and I mean, again, like I haven't heard anything about your worldview that I haven't heard anything that actually answers that question. Like, you don't even have a definition of what evil is or what good is. In your view, they're all just this preferences.
Elliott, go ahead.
You're in the same exact position.
I'm not though. I'm not because No, I'm not. And if your argument is that I can't actually know anything objectively, then I think that's silly, because then, like, what does a stop sign not say stop? Like when Christ says those who live by the sword die by the sword, does he mean those who live by the gun die by the gun? Oh, like that wasn't, like, come on.
I didn't say that. I didn't say we can't know things objectively. That maybe
Yeah.
Elliott's opinion, but I didn't go down that road with you. My point at this has nothing is that has nothing to do with whether or not a God exists. You're trying to use that as a way to say, hey, because you can't prove this, therefore God. That's so God of the gaps, dude.
Yeah, I mean, again, like specifically, I think that a God accounts for it better, right? It's not just me plugging.
You think a God accounts for it, but that is not evidence. A unicorn accounts for it too.
Well, I also affirm certain historical claims, right? Like I affirm, the resurrection of Christ, and I don't think that happens without a sort of divine intervention.
Yeah, dude, my cat thinks she's God, and I have historical evidence that proves that she thinks she's God because of the way she treats me, and when she shits wherever she fucking wants. My cat's God.
They're like that, huh? Yeah, no, I mean, I understand that people disagree. I understand that Muslims would refer to the same logic, and I wouldn't discount their belief system purely based on that. And I actually looked into Islam as well. I just think the Quran is full of contradictions.
And we would say the same thing about the Bible, but
I haven't found a contradiction in the Bible that actually sticks, though, if you review it in a charitable lens.
Of course. Elliott, I want to give you the way to finish this out. Whenever you're done, we'll move on.
I can see that Josh Patterson's been waiting, and why don't we just bring him on?
All right. Welcome, Josh, to the stage.
Yeah.
Hey, guys, how are you?
Good.
Wonderful. How are you, sir?
Doing good.
Josh, I'm going to ask you to do us a favor. I saw you in the back room there for a while, and when Christian was describing God, I saw you nodding your head no. Because I know you have a different view than Christian does of the Christian God. So why don't you tell us your definition of the Christian God, and then Elliott and I will have fun watching YouTube. References of the Christian God.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Okay, cool. Yeah, well, so I think as you guys already know, I don't think there is such thing as the conception of the Christian God. There are multiple views that people hold. Like the God that John Calvin believes in is very different than the John of, say, John Wesley. So there's difference of opinions. And so coming from a Catholic perspective, the whole unmoved mover thing, I reject all of that because I'm a process thinker. So my conception of the divine falls within, the philosophy of organism from Alfred North Whitehead. And so I wouldn't make the claim that is the Christian God. I would just say that is my understanding. If there is a God, which is as Alan and Elliott know, is a big if for me. If God exists, in my perspective, the God of process thought is the one that makes the most sense. So I'm a process theist on days when I believe in God.
Yeah, I'm a little outclassed here. I'm familiar with the basics, but I don't know that concept. Do you mind explaining that to me?
Yeah, sure. So Alfred North Whitehead was a math professor, and then he took on a job teaching philosophy at Harvard in his late 60s, a contemporary of Bertrand Russell. They actually wrote some rather large nerdy math stuff together.
Yeah.
And what he was trying to do was he was alive when quantum physics kind of started breaking everything that we know about science. And Whitehead was trying to come up with the philosophy that could account for what science was doing in the world. And then ultimately, when he was doing that, he came to believe in a version of God because it's necessary in his system. Now it looks very different though. So process thought would reject core tenets of classical theism. So God is not omnipotent. God's omniscience, I would say God is still omniscient, but the future doesn't yet exist. And therefore God does not know it because it doesn't exist to be known. I would reject that God is immutable. I would reject that God is impassible. I would reject that God exists outside of time. I reject supernaturalism. So I'm a religious naturalist. yeah, so it's just it's a very different kind of conception of God, because I found the God of, I used to be an evangelical. I found the God of classical theism incredulous. It didn't work with my worldview, my understanding. That's why I like Alan and Elliott, because we agree on like 90% of things, and then I'm like, yeah, but maybe God, and they're like, stop doing that.
Yeah.
I feel like that's our relationship summed up in like in a sentence or two. But yeah, that's some of the process conceptions.
Yeah, I mean, that's really interesting. You know, I guess at first I just have to obviously say, like, obviously people disagree doesn't prove anything false. So, you know, it's a classic objection to say, oh, well, there's a lack of unity in Christianity. You know, you guys don't even agree. I don't think that actually proves anything false. You know, I think we would all kind of at least, you know, even it might be a sign, but I don't want to put words in your guys' mouth. But anyway, yeah, I'm unfamiliar. But I guess my question would be, like, if you believe that God is not omnipotent, do you believe that he was created?
No, I don't.
Okay.
I would still, yeah. But I would want to say that like God, and if we're going to use theistic language, creation, are co-eternal, that they necessitate one another. So God is the ever creator in my perspective. So, you know, regardless of cosmic epoch, God is creating and always has been, if God exists.
Yeah, I mean, I like that would contradict the idea of actus purus, but for me, one of the only reasons why God, you know, makes sense and fits in the spot of, you know, the unmoved mover, the mechanism that creates everything, is from pure actuality. And if God is changeable, obviously that brings up the problem of, you know, change only happens when potential is reduced to actual, but or maybe the other way around. This causes pure actuality, so it cannot change. And I'm reading from my notes here, so I apologize. Second, since causal chains cannot be infinite, this means there can't be an infinite.
Hey, Elliott, while he's frozen, do you want to, when he comes back, do you want to pick up with Christian and see if you want to take him down any paths that I may not have touched with him?
Yeah, I'll think about it.
All right. Yeah, you can finish your thought, Christian.
Did I cut out? Sorry. Yeah, I mean, I guess I'm just curious about what your view on time is and contingency.
Yeah, so I think I reject. I guess it would first be helpful to explain to you why I reject all of those things, because of the problem of evil and and divine hiddenness. Is why I reject classical theism. Mainly, I think it's the strongest argument that an atheist has. I don't think you could say God is all loving and all good, look at the world around us, and then have that make sense. You know, if we come from the perspective that God, like the Calvinistic kind of fully deterministic perspective, then that means God ordained the Holocaust. That is objectively terrible, evil. There's no good reason to call that good. So like Calvin can fuck off, basically, in my perspective. And then within the kind of the other perspective, when, like, I guess the Arminian view, and people would argue that people have free will, they still want to hold to something like the idea that God knows the future fully, that God didn't have to create, that God created out of nothing, which means God is still morally culpable for evil, because God knew the world that he was going to create, knew that he would create a world with the Holocaust happening, chose to do it anyway. We call it free will, but there's no freedom in it. Like, if God knows the future extensively, if God knew that today, instead of grilling pork chops like I'm supposed to be doing right now, I got on the internet to talk to you guys, I couldn't do that. I don't have a choice, because God knew that as a future condition perfectly. So I would flip it on its head, because basically the unmoved mover bit comes from like a very specific understanding of perfection. So I would want to argue God is the most moved mover. That God's perfection is that God can continuously learn, continuously shift, continuously grow. But I would, you know, to kind of maybe hopefully combat some of your fears, because you could, you know, ask like, oh, what does that mean? Maybe tomorrow God's going to be an asshole, where today God is loving. There's an essence experience binate that exists within this conception of the divine, where the nature of who God is doesn't change, but God's experience changes moment to moment as God experiences time in the universe, you know, with everyone else, basically.
very real sense, then, Josh. I mean, the God of your definition is pretty much inconsequential because whether he existed or didn't, we would still be doing the same thing.
Yeah. That's why we get along and then disagree.
Yeah. So in a very real sense, evil is inconsequential to God too, because he doesn't cause it or not cause it. He's just there.
Yeah, I mean, I guess, and this is a point that you guys are probably going to be like, what after? But like, I think that God has every right to wipe out humanity today, if he wanted to or not, and it wouldn't be evil. I want to say that, right? Like, there's a distinction between God wiping out the entire human race and humans murdering. And it's not just because of the fact that in both cases people die, right? It's the nature of the action. Whereas humans, we don't have authority to take dominion over the lives of others, where God can end creation today, and he would not incur any penalty or debt from that. So things like the Holocaust, yeah, I mean, obviously, I think, I believe in God. I believe that God, hates to see that happen, but also that he is authorized and has, if you believe in the Bible, like I believe, all of humanity was wiped out at one point, and I don't incur any penalty on God for that. Are you familiar with supralapsarianism versus infralapsarianism, Josh?
Yeah, but dude, it's been forever.
You
have to define both of those terms again.
Yeah, I forget which one is which, ironically. Hold on, let me find. So I forget which one. Sorry.
Supra is where God foresees.
Yeah. One of these is like the Calvinist view, from my understanding, and I hope I'm not misrepresenting.
I think Calvinism would be supralapsarianism. I think. Alan, do you know? Because didn't you have more of a Reformed background, right?
No. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, supralapsarianism is where God predicts, the Calvinist model, and the supra is the Arminian model where God.
Oh, so I had it backwards. Okay.
I'm now you got me questioning.
I don't look it up. I don't actually know.
This conversation anywhere. Kellie Shell 4937. Thank you for your super chat. She says, "Thanks, Josh. Josh, apparently we were dying without you. So here we go."
I know. I think this is a very interesting conversation because I've never heard this, and two, obviously there's a lot of problems when you. And like, I don't want to, I've never heard the belief, but like there are problems that arise when you say that God is, maybe not like the ultimate causal power of everything. Like to me, that is God. So like, we're not talking about the same being anymore, obviously. Right.
Right. But I would still say that God is like the most powerful, that there's nothing else more powerful than God, but that because of God's nature, God is limited in what God can do. So I would say that
Josh, you were right, by the way. Supra is the Calvinist one.
Oh, cool. Okay. I feel like that's the only reason I remembered it is because I've spent so long being like, I don't like Calvinism.
And then there's infra.
I can agree with you guys on that.
Yeah, and I think Christian too. Like, I hope you don't feel like I'm coming at you personally, because that's
not at all.
My intent. Like, the reason that I care about this is because I used to be a pastor. And so some of that kind of pastoral concern carries over from time to time. And there are so many people who leave the Christian tradition because they are handed, in my perception, shitty versions of God. And then, basically, I think that's unnecessary. And so I don't need people to agree with me. I don't even need people to stay Christian. Like, within my process perspective, I guess you would call me like religious pluralist. But it's one of the number one reported reasons when people leave Christianity, outside of the current tied up Christian nationalism nonsense that's going on. A God that is incredulous because it doesn't match our understanding of reality is right up there. So that's kind of why I bang on it about it a bit. I'm gonna bring this up here. Super chat from earlier.
Excuse me, Evil. Thank you so much for the super chat. In my opinion, is that which is grossly antithetical to humanist ethics. Evil, in my opinion, is that which is grossly antithetical to human ethics. You guys want to respond to that?
Dave Murphy 666. I like his.
Define the term humanist for me again, please.
Well, it's human-centered, not God-centered. Okay. So it would be anything that would promote human flourishing. But of course, you have the subjectivity problem with that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, that's what I would say is like, ultimately, I would just ask, like, what is human flourishing? Like, to me, human flourishing is not, and hedonism has a negative connotation, but with the purely academic meaning of the phrase, like, to me, the purpose of life is not to maximize pleasure and minimize pain. I actually think suffering has some value, right? And we don't have the right to cause each other suffering, but I think God often does cause us suffering, and that we actually benefit from it in the sense of that it prepares us to bear the weight of endless glory and power. Like, if you look back at the garden, right? Like, what I think the garden is, it's not just the tree with an arbitrary fruit. It's the tree of knowledge of good and evil. And what does power and knowledge get us without virtue? Right? It gets us nuclear weapons. It gets us man-made horrors beyond our comprehensions. And I guess I believe that when, and I believe Genesis 1 through 11 is written figuratively and 12 is written more literally. And going forward, that's a, academic belief, commonly held. But I guess I believe that, life is meant to be a series of obtaining virtue in the pursuit of beatitude and union with God. And when we skip, the line to get that knowledge and power without that virtue, it breaks us in some way fundamentally to where we're not fulfilling some sort of obligation that we have as creatures, as things that are not creators, that are by nature actually, subordinate to God. Like, God doesn't condescend when he condescends, because that's just his nature. So I guess, my question would be what is humanist ethics? If it's just to obtain pleasure, then, obviously there's a lot of the sheriff problem that we can throw into there. Like, do you define pleasure by the amount of pleasure one person experiences or collective pleasure? I don't know.
Elliott, did you want to respond to that, or?
So here's my issue, Christian. I was never a philosophical Christian. These philosophical arguments for the existence of God, I found them convincing because I was already a believer. So that they didn't convince me or not convince me. I was more of a, my belief was based on a personal experience, obviously, and being raised into a very specific theology. Here's my problem. If we were to create a flowchart of, if we were to step completely outside of where our specific theology rests, where the final conclusion that you're at, or the final conclusion that I was at as a Christian, I was a very specific type of Baptist, and I was to step all the way back out of that to being someone without any belief at all, an atheist, and then I was to take a series of choices through that flowchart to get all the way back to where I was before. I've got a mathematical model of how many choices, what the probability is that I was at the correct conclusion. And that mathematical model shows that the probability of me being wrong about that conclusion was almost 100%. So I'm stuck out here as an atheist. And when I left Christianity, I didn't find any particular belief in a God convincing, because that's what this is all about. We're either convinced or we're not. I'm not convinced. You're obviously convinced. You're convinced for different reasons than I would have been convinced. But I'm stuck out here as someone with no belief in God, and even further than that, I have no belief in the supernatural. I can't get past the very first question on that flowchart, get me all the way back to where I was before, or all the way back to where you are now. So I'm stuck dealing with this: is the supernatural real? Now, I can't even get past that. But even if I could get past that, I'm okay, what form does a supernatural take? Okay, well, is it a God or is it not a God? You might be able to use some philosophical arguments to maybe convince me to get back to that. But there's no chance in hell I'm going to find my way all the way back to a very specific theology just based on the raw probabilities. So I'm stuck out here dealing with that issue. And I'm just not convinced. And I don't find philosophical arguments convincing.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I mean, obviously, I would say that the sheer amount of differing beliefs doesn't make any one of them more or less true. And you could also make the counter argument using that logic that, the amount of people that believe in Christianity, as I think it's the world's largest religion, means that maybe, it did have some divine support. There are other lenses. Like, have you read any of Dostoevsky's books?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think and ultimately, this isn't like aimed at you guys. Like, I do find, whether it's in Mormons or Islam, I think a lot of the time, it is not an issue of the mind to accept God. As someone who believes in God, I think it is an issue of the heart sometimes. Dostoevsky is really, as contemporary with Nietzsche has these very academic, broad, big brain arguments that are very good. And I agree with Nietzsche on a lot, right? Like, people misrepresent his God is dead quote, and he's mocking, I think, kind of like the David Hume type, where they're like, oh, God is dead. It doesn't matter. We're cheersing. We're having fun. It's just whatever. He's like, no, you don't understand what you've done. Like, it's as if the world is like cut off of its hinges and we're spinning, there's no up or down. Like, and Nietzsche, I think, is the correct person in the the atheist reality. But Dostoevsky, and this is really funny, right? Dostoevsky's books, he never offers, like, as a psychologist, he doesn't offer academic arguments for God. He offers kind of very human ones, right? With whether it's Alyosha or I think it's in Crime and Punishment. I forget the name of the character, but he is the dream with the horse being beaten, and he has to, go and help the horse in this dream. Dostoevsky appeals to just the human psychology and the human condition, and it's not an academic argument that is based on truth. But Nietzsche actually experiences this in his life. He sees a horse being beaten, and he does exactly what Dostoevsky's character is said to do in the book, where he goes over and comforts the horse. And this actually sends Nietzsche into a mental breakdown. Like, for the last few years of his life after this, he can't function, right? I think his sister takes care of him. And this is like one of the defining moments, if not the one, based on my brief research. Maybe Josh, I saw you comment about Nietzsche, I think, earlier, so maybe you're more knowledgeable than me. But yeah, I mean, so I also think there's an aspect of it where, and this is something I've started to realize recently, because I agree with you that, like, a lot of the times things that make you emotionally feel better don't always, correspond with what is true. But I think that there is an aspect of
But one of the requirements to having a good faith conversation is to take the other guy at his word. And so when I tell you that in my case, it's not a heart issue, I'm being totally honest about it.
Yeah.
I was a sincere believer as a Christian, 100%. Like, I didn't fall away because it was a heart issue or atheism made me feel better. It actually made me feel worse for a period of time. Like, I fell into a terrible depression because I had lost my entire belief system and what I thought was the truth. Became convinced that it was not. So it's much more comfortable to be a Christian because there's a lot of benefits that come to believing that, like imagining that everything's going to be made just in the end, or that we have eternal life. But for me, it's not a hard issue at all. Like, I genuinely don't believe because I'm genuinely not convinced, and I genuinely was a believer at one point.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I would just you could tell me if you have objections. I'm by no means like a professional apologist or I'm just a guy. But yeah, I mean, I also had really, a lot of intellectual and emotional, not saying that you did, I'm saying I did. And I found good answers, right? And even if I can't remember the answers to all the questions that I've had, I've kind of gone through the ringer at this point, 2 years later, with every probably possible objection. I'm chronically online looking up debates. I usually find that Christianity's been battle tested, and I think, unlike Islam, I think it is consistent. Like, I believe that. I don't believe there are contradictions. I know you would disagree, but I don't believe there are.
Well, I would hope we would disagree, because obviously that's what we're here for. But like, the things that I want to talk about when I have these conversations, it isn't the philosophical. I see them as red herrings. I think that they're a very recent debate tactic in the aftermath of the new atheist movement, because Christianity, I believe, has struggled to answer a lot of those evidential issues, and the evidential issues are what took me out of Christianity. So the things that I actually want to talk to people about are the things that made me not a Christian, and those were evidential things. For example, textual criticism. Like, I'd love to have a conversation about textual criticism.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not super knowledgeable on it, but you could try me. I might have to, I usually when I there's the accusation of the mismatch of dates in John versus the synoptic gospel. Like, that is not really a contradiction. So that's just an example of one that I have resolved. And I'm saying this not to give more credit to the Bible, but to demonstrate my method of that is a contradiction seemingly. Let me look it up. And if I find an answer that I'm satisfied with, I think it's I would say, okay, well, this explains the contradiction. And, so if you have questions or concerns, I'd love to hear them. And maybe we can talk.
Yeah, I would invite you back next week to actually have that conversation. I know right now we've gone a full hour and 54 minutes so we're kind of limited this time around. But I think that would be much more interesting to myself, at least.
Yeah, well, Christian, you're welcome back anytime. We have thoroughly enjoyed the conversation.
Yeah, man. Sorry if I got this is an emotional issue for me in addition to an intellectual one, and I'm not very articulated. So
Dude,
no.
fine.
Oh, you're very articulate.
Yeah,
you are.
Thank you.
Not only
Thank
that,
you.
you were delightful to talk to. You were fine. No, you didn't do it. Yeah, you were great, dude. You're welcome back anytime.
All
Josh,
right, thank you, my friend.
I don't think emotions are inherently bad either, Christian. I think none of us here would be here if there was not some kind of emotional investment. I think we can admit that it does impact our lives. Otherwise we wouldn't give a shit. We would just be like, screw it. It doesn't matter. So I don't think we have to write that part off. We can just admit oh yeah, this matters to me. I think that's okay to say.
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you, gentlemen. I hope you have a wonderful weekend.
Dude, absolutely.
Thanks for coming on.
Thanks for coming out, buddy. Bye-bye. Josh, before we go into anything else with you, again, another super chat we need to deal with. It's the last one. Thank you, E. Murphy, again for another $5. Christians have no foundation upon which to construct a coherent and consistent ethical framework. They're sycophants for their own concept of God.
Yeah, I mean, I think point well taken. I think this is why you see Christianity being weaponized to do tremendous evil and then also to do very good things. So the most appealing version of Christianity to me would be one that would make some kind of move where it's okay, the ultimate revelation of who God is the person of Jesus, a la Hebrews or whatever. If you want to know what God looks like, look to the person of Jesus. Anything that doesn't look like Jesus is a false representation of who God is. And then try to base your ethical position as a Christian in the teachings of Jesus. To me, that's the best way to do it. But it's still riddled with problems. That was one of the things that broke for me, right? When I was doing the whole deconstruction thing, and then I found there was a very specific pastor that I found who was very Jesus-centered. He was the head pastor of one of the largest Anabaptist churches in Canada and the US, multiple sites. His theology wasn't shit. And then he fell and had a whole big scandal, ended up going to prison. And that kind of blew it up for me because it was oh, wait a minute. Even this guy that has the best version of this Christianity still, this happened. So I don't know. I think it's fair. It's a fair critique.
And I bet you never thought you'd hear that from a Christian.
I just try to be honest.
Well, I'm glad you were here to answer because I'm not sure I have much more to add to that. I don't know.
People do dumb stuff.
Yeah, I think that they're mostly correct on that because we often hear Christians say that they have this objective morality or they get their odds from the Bible. But if you drill down on that, and unfortunately we don't have Christian still on here to ask him this, but I want to know how exactly you get those odds from the scripture. The scripture isn't a framework; it's just a list of commands. Mm-hmm. So you may or may not have commands in scripture that are going to apply to your specific situation. But if they're not there, I don't know how you get them from there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, this is why I'm a boring person to have on this thing because
we might not
agree on a lot.
Hang on. Just remind everybody, coming up this week on Sunday, 7 p.m. Central, you got Why God Hates Science. It's going to be on Skeptic Haven's Let's Talk with Neil and Ember. Please join it. That's one of the best shows we got. It's so great. Another really awesome show, probably up and climbing, might might be giving Let's Talk just a little bit of competition here. It's pretty great. Is Ty Goodwin and Drew Beckius joining us for Life After Faith, Wednesday at 7 p.m. Central. Jesus was the worst boyfriend. That'll be a fun conversation to have. And then also a new show that's really awesome as well coming up, Critical Call on Thursday at 7 p.m. Central with AJ. She's known for Ways to Human. That's her channel. And she started that show, and it's really cool. They talk about all kinds of scientific things and everything. And Jason Tonks. So if you have any questions about anything, you can feel free to call them as well. It's a great show. So that's what's coming up this week, Thursday, 7 p.m., Critical Call. So those are shows coming up on Skeptic Haven. We hope that you will stick around and continue to support this channel. It's really awesome, and we're grateful to be a part of Skeptic Haven as well as the Deconversionists. So we hope you'll join us again next Friday at 5 p.m. We're going to be talking about hell. So that's going to be a fun topic. So I'll have my 2 Unravelation episodes from the series. They'll be populated in the links that'll be coming up that you'll see for next week's show promo. As well, you can find them on my channel. If you go and subscribe to the Unraveler AB for Alan Bonder, the Unraveler AB, it's in the info below. You'll be able to get all those series episodes, and that's what we'll be talking about each week following. Also, be sure to subscribe to both channels, Skeptic Haven and the Deconversionists. Also, the info is in the link. If you're watching this after the live and it's the recorded version, you'll be able to subscribe to all 3 channels just by hitting that subscribe button right there below. So we hope that you'll support us all in that way. It really makes a difference. Please like as well, because that goes a long way, really helping show YouTube the types of people that they can that need to hear this type of material. So please do that. And then if you are either a theist or in the middle of your own deconversion or have deconverted, we invite you to come over and join us on Deconversion Nation on Facebook. It's a great place to interact and have conversation, especially if you're a theist with questions that you'd like to ask atheists. That's what we're there for. Josh is in that group, and so is Elliott and I as well. So please come on, join us there. So that's what's coming up this week. Josh, before we end the show, you came on because I'm assuming you wanted to talk about why evil is never God's fault. I know you're anxious to talk about that. So we'll give it some extra time here just because I want to hear what you had to say, and I'm sure Elliott does as well. Hopefully I'm not taking up too much of your time, Elliott. Do you have to go, or are you good?
No, I'm good. Go for it.
Josh, let's do it.
Okay, well, I'll be brief. I think this question is really important, and I find it rather unattractive when Christians try to argue. Like, I don't know Samuel, so I don't want to beat on him while he's not here, but I found that conversation rather insufferable. Like the kind of mental gymnastics I think is a massive turnoff. And if like he's an evangelical the way that he claims he is, part of his whole belief system is that he should be converting people to the religion. And when you say silly things that push people away, it's counterproductive.
Fourth discussion on slavery with him. At least mine.
I can't handle it. You guys are very patient and gracious. But I mean, basically all I wanted to kind of do was come on and be like, hey, Christians who are listening, please stop trying to defend these things. Alan and Elliott have a good point that should be taken very seriously. And by continually to try to defend these things, you're just causing harm to the very thing you are trying to protect. So, within my process framework, there's a way to solve, so to speak, the problem of evil. But it's not going to be satisfactory for most people. But that's really the only reason I found process to be helpful, was because the problem of evil was such a big deal to me. But it comes down to rejecting omnipotence. It comes down to recognizing, like, if God exists, God is spirit and doesn't have a localized body. It comes down to like my basically metaphysical conception of how the world works, which, by the way, Christian, if you're still listening, like, not all atheists are physicalists. Like, you have atheists who are panpsychists, you have atheists who are idealists, you have atheists who try to be process thinkers, although I don't think it really works, because Whitehead was like, well, we kind of need a conception of the divine. But anyway, I just mostly wanted to say that, like, hey, Christians, please stop defending this. Alan and Elliott have a really good point, and you should probably wrestle with it instead of trying to paper over it with nonsense. That's mostly what I wanted to say, and I figured some other people would be here, and they'd be like, Josh, you're an idiot. And I'd be like, well, that's a bummer.
Yeah, it only starts with slavery. It gets far worse from there. Because
for sure.
we have a book that apparently the claim is that it describes God's works. And so you can judge God for yourself based on his works. And if you want to label him good and you want to label him all merciful or all loving or moral, you can't make that jive in any kind of context or even worldview with his actually description of his actual works. You're defending the indefensible.
I agree. And then having to like paint yourself into a corner where you have to admit like, oh, if God told me to bash my infant's head against the rocks, I would do it. Like, that's insane. Like,
or to say God would never do that and to justify that and try to save it.
Yeah.
He immediately said he would ask God why, or I mean, he eventually got to that. He'd ask God why. And my retort was going to be, well, Abraham didn't ask God why when he was going to sacrifice Isaac.
Yeah, he was just going to do
it. Who are you, oh man, to question God? From Job.
Right, Job, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, really, if God is this good God that they claim him to be, like that he always does maximally good, as he said, and he's always doing the right thing. And he's when God came to Abraham and commanded him to kill his son, the more logical reading of that text would have been that if Abraham said okay and went and did it, God would have said, what the hell are you doing? That's not my character. You should have questioned me.
Right, you should know better, yeah.
But he didn't. Instead, he blesses him for acting out his order.
How does a Christian know when it's a test and when it's for real?
Yeah, I don't. Yeah, that's why so for me, that's why like I'm not necessarily so tied to Christianity per se. It's the tradition I grew up in. And so like I know how the language works. I can speak as a Christian. I'm more concerned with love and like human flourishing. Well, and the flourishing of all life really. So like I care about the environment and such. And so I think that's part of why we get along, is because it at least unless I'm wrong about you guys also care about like human flourishing and taking care of the environment and these kind of things. So like I'm more interested in that. Like the question of does God exist is less interesting to me. I'm more interested in knowing what do you do with that information. Like if you weaponize God to be a shit person and say like God told me to kill all the Jews, I was just following God's orders, like that's terrible. But if you use God to, I don't know, say like, oh, I helped this homeless person because that's what God wanted me to do, that is a much better use of that. But I don't think like it necessitates belief in God for people to be good.
No, well, I would argue the opposite. I can tell you, at least from I don't know how all people who have left Christianity feel, but seemingly the very second, and you know my testimony, my story, the second that I was standing there having my prayer walk and everything just like the brainwashing just disappeared all at once seemingly, and I was like, I'm an atheist. Like it was the craziest moment. If anybody's interested, it'll be all the information's in my book, and I've told the story many times in other places. But seemingly in that very moment, something switched in my head where instantly I was no longer feeling the need to defend this God like Samuel was doing, where what all these atrocious things that we're talking about, I had to validate as good in some fucked up way. I had to do the gymnastics like these guys are doing here on the show. And instantly in that moment, something switched and I was like, I don't have to do that anymore. I instantly now cared more about everybody around me, including myself, than I ever did before being a Christian, submitting to this God. Because no longer was this God telling me that I was worthless and needed him. I now had my own worth. And it took time to get my own worth. And I had to go through a lot of therapy for that because that shit really fucked my head up. But it was like instantly I knew like something had changed. I now care more about humanity than I ever did. I'm telling you, and Christianity doesn't make you love people more than being an atheist. That's just bullshit. And I'm not saying it's one way or the other. I'm not arguing that if you're a Christian, you love less. You have that mentality that God's always good, then you're going to say some really weird things like Samuel was tonight, where you're willing to stone people if God says that you should. But I mean, like, it's just, you're either a good person or a bad person. And I find that the good people are the ones that are starting to kind of journey where you are, where they're like this to the God of the Bible and starting to reinvent him in ways that make more sense to them because he is not a good God. So
Yeah.
Be what's happening.
And even from like, I mean, to your point, like from a psychological perspective, like rule 101 of therapy is that the job of the therapist is to practice unconditional positive regard. So like telling people that they're a piece of shit and they suck is not conducive to bringing about like flourishing. It like actually it comes from a place of, again, unconditional positive regard and acceptance. So that even that piece of like the worm theology inherent in a lot of like conservative, fundamentalist, evangelical, kind of Calvinist types of theology is counterintuitive to what you want it to be. And they'll be like, oh, but grace. And be like, yeah, but then you also believe God's going to like torture you in hell forever. So get out of here with your grace. It doesn't work. Like,
yeah, in order for there to be grace, there has to be a contrast.
Yeah. It's like, come on, guys. But I don't know. I've been reading, so Simone de Beauvoir was a existentialist, French existentialist, kind of contemporaries of like around like Sartre. I mean, her and Sartre were kind of like lovers. And I know one of the things that people hit you guys with a lot is like, oh, you can't have morality if you don't have God. And Simone de Beauvoir wrote a book called The Ethics of Ambiguity, which is her within the existentialist system as an atheist arguing for ethics. It's a fantastic text. So any Christians that are still listening, go read Simone de Beauvoir because she's a badass.
You're trying to indoctrinate them into postmodernism. don't mention that term or you'll feel.
Yeah, it's a dirty word, right? Yeah. Well, that process thought is a constructive postmodernist perspective. So, yeah.
Extremely unpopular with the American mind.
Yeah. Well, it's a boogeyman, like many things are. So.
Oh yeah. You guys are the ultimate devil.
Right. We've been called as such, like with all of we're promoting something called Theology Beer Camp right now. And dude, I don't know what the difference is, but somehow this year the algorithm has fed our stuff to like the wrong kinds of people and the name calling that you guys are, the most evil Satan worshiping, blah, 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 blah. It's nuts. And it's been like intense.
Yeah, I can give you some pointers on where that's coming from, but that's best on off the air.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you guys for letting me hang out and crash your party. You guys are always fun to talk to.
No problem. I brought you on with Christian on purpose because I figured you'd be able to address philosophical stuff a lot better.
Yeah, I mean it was fun. He definitely knows like his like that section. Like I'm very familiar with his line of thinking. I just fundamentally disagree with him, but I get it. Like.
Right.
I get it. Yeah.
Well, it's always a delight to have you on, Jess. It's been fun every time I've talked to you. So
yeah, I enjoy it. I think you guys are a lot of fun. And it helps me to like it like genuinely there's been multiple times where I'm like, oh, I have to go rethink this. This doesn't actually work as well as I think it does, or whatever. So I appreciate you guys as conversation partners that aren't assholes.
Well, I'm glad you did that. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm glad you feel that way. And
if you're an asshole, you attract assholes. We don't want that.
Yeah. Absolutely. I'm with you. So,
but thank you for your support, man. It's really appreciated. And we hope that others will continue to join and be a part of this journey with us. Cause we're just hoping to help people see some of the things that you were actually expressing. I mean, honestly, if we got no further than to get people to see what you see, I feel like that'd be a win. So, betterment of humanity. That's what we're going for here. So we appreciate it, Josh. Thank you very much for joining us, dude. And we'll definitely plan to have you back again anytime.
Cool. Thank you, guys.
Peace. Jamie, you were in the room for a while. I don't know who you are. I apologize that we weren't able to get you in before you popped out, but that's all right. Maybe you can join us next week. Be sure to have your camera on so we can see you before we pop you in the room. But I hope you'll join us next week. It's going to be a fun discussion. We are going to be talking about hell. It's going to be fun. So, Elliott, any thoughts to wrap up this show? Anything that you'd like to round out for us?
I usually don't, because by the time we hit that 2-hour mark, like I'm done.
Yeah. Yeah, it's exhausting, but fun, and I really enjoy this. So, Anyway, shout out to Skeptic Haven, and thank you guys, everybody behind the scenes that are willing to be a part of this with us and have us on. We are grateful, and we hope that we can continue to support you and make this thing grow with you guys. Thank you all for the super chats. And remember, they go to Skeptic Haven, and we are grateful for them because they help keep the lights on and help shows like this and the rest of the ones you see each day continue to flourish. So we hope you'll join us next week on Deconversionists at 5 p.m. Eastern on Friday night. Remember, every Christian has their own version of Christianity, as we saw tonight. We're here to unravel your conversion. Have a great night, everybody.